What'd we do?
Oh, yeah, now you're moving.
Okay, now we're good. Okay, we had to fact check this back here. Sorry, Bedoin, you make me dizzy sometimes without even doing that. You know what I'm saying? That wasn't funny. All right. Okay, here we go. Let's see what we got here.
You didn't know this was going to be a sitcom, did you? All right, pull this over here like this.
Just like that. Okay, welcome to Neon Talk, everybody. We just did episode 535, did the vocals for it. That's what we do down here. This is the home of the neon beat and neon jazz, and that's the way we like it. And there's that warm crackle. It's like popcorn on Mars.
A very famous jazz pianist.
You're hearing
From
George Shearing.
From Britain.
Sir George Shearing.
Yes.
He's been knighted. But he loved the morning.
Some folks have labeled this tea room.
Yeah.
But there's a skill to it.
Indeed.
That and definitely a mix.
Yeah. This is going to be the perfect music for a story I have for you, John Christoper.
Oh.
Yes.
All right.
As we throttle down a little bit, I got a story. So this is what happened. We had a van that we had to pick up at CarMax in Kansas. Okay, we're out here in Belton. So I needed
And Belton, for those of you in the Kansas City area, is south of you, okay?
Yes. It's south of you. Exactly you.
All right.
So I needed to get some money, and I get tired of going to an ATM, a stuffy ATM. So I decided to buy flowers for a very special someone that's in the room. You'll see here in a second. And I get the flowers. We get in the car. I pick my girlfriend Amanda up, and we go, and we have to pick up our van. And we're driving there, and we're talking about our day. And he said, hey, by the way, I'm interviewing a guy, a drummer, who was in a rock and roll band. And he's a big-time guy, sold millions of albums. But these guys, and this leads into another ventricle of the story, a lot of these guys are trained as jazz drummers, like Jimmy Chamberlain, for instance, from the Smashing Pumpkins. He was trained as a jazz guy, but he actually...
I'd heard that about him.
Yeah, so he has a great album, the Jimmy Chamberlain Complex. I played him on the show about a month ago, and it's beautiful. But these guys, they get trained as jazz musicians, and they can just branch out and do whatever they want. But once they make their day, and they want to go back to their roots, they release jazz albums. So I'm telling her about this guy I'm going to interview that was a drummer in a particular band in the 90s. And the band happened to be the Spin Doctors. So what did you say to me when I said, oh, by the way, how did this happen? How am I interviewing this guy? What did you sing to me?
If you want to buy me flowers, well, go ahead now.
So what did I do? I forgot I had flowers in the back seat. I said, oh, by the way, I got you some flowers. I grabbed the bouquet and picked them up. So she had to remind me by doing that. So anyway, his name is Aaron Comas. He's a drummer. And he has one of the most unique albums, jazz-wise, that I've listened to in a long time. There's so many lines that get blurred, but it's really so compact with sonic textures. It's hard to put my finger on, but you should get out and get it. It's a great album.
All right, and the name of the album again? Can you remember?
Hold on.
All right.
Hold on. I got it here.
Fortunately, we have Phil here.
Oh, it's called Sculptures.
Sculptures.
Okay. And it was a really interesting structure he took a picture off of Lake Van. He was in Vancouver, I believe, at the time. But anyways, it's great. It's good.
Cool.
Good stuff. So.
It's amazing how some of these artists who will come out of jazz or even the classical disciplines will branch out and wind up in rock and roll and then wind up going back. Was David Bowie? He did a jazz album.
His last one, there was jazz tunes. He always gravitated towards the jazz.
Yeah.
That was his thing. I don't know how well he was trained in it, but I think it was just something that was always within his soul. That's what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So he was a jazz cat at heart.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll get your bumper sticker. And if you don't like Hank Williams, you can, yeah.
That's right. You like that?
How do you like me now?
How do you like me now? You shine box. So what's on your mind, John Christoper?
What?
What was that timing, clown?
Oh, the timing joke?
Yeah.
Oh, what you do is you ask me what I do for a living.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah, and wait a minute. Well, it has to have a certain continuity to it.
That's right.
So the first question is, you ask me, what do I do for a living? I will answer, and then you ask me, what is the most difficult part of your job? So, here we go.
What do you do for a living?
Stand-up comedian.
What's the most
timing?
I love it every single time. It's like the horse that walks into the bar and has a long face. I love it. So, anything else going on?
Have you ever tuned into Lyle Lovett?
I love Lyle.
Yeah, I sometimes on my own show I will defer to some newer cuts from the artists that are sort of keeping the faith. Well, I included "She's No Lady, She's My Wife" in one of my recent shows by Lyle Lovett, and more than a few people loved it. I have not had a record create as many letters as that one.
Wow, that's nice.
Yeah.
Lyle's great. In fact, I think I won tickets to a Lyle show and couldn't make it to it, but for whatever reason, I've always had a soft spot in my heart for him. He's good. So that's trying to think what else there was.
I smell wood burning.
There's something. I thought there was something else, but it escaped me. So
that's good. And what's on my mind? I'm just trying to keep up with the Neon Beat shows. For those of you that are tuning in and may not have realized that I do a radio show too, the Neon Beat is a show that I carry some jazz, but what I'm really featuring is music of the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So what we have is the latter big band, basically the how would we say this? The Truman, latter Truman, Eisenhower, and Johnson, and Kennedy and Johnson years. So covering quite a few years there, but it's interesting how if you have that perspective, how even the contemporary music we have today is built on the shoulders of these people, including the jazz artists.
Yeah.
In the 1950s, the latter 40s and the 1950s, when bebop was being developed, is one of the times that I came up in. We had for what educational television there was at that time, and I don't mean to. Television was new when I was. My dad worked at a television station in Lincoln, Nebraska, KCXL KJIN-TV, and the local public television station hardly got out of the city at the University of Nebraska. But we had an old Motorola, stand-up Motorola black and white TV, and we would watch what jazz they were willing to put on the air at that time.
Yeah.
And consequently, it was a good time to be listening to jazz.
Yeah.
Because you could hear it develop.
Yep.
You could hear it gel
Yeah.
into some of what we now have as contemporary jazz.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's all those guys were doing at that time. They didn't, the old guard called them, the newer guys called the older guys moldy figs.
Yeah.
But the older guys didn't want to have anything to do with it, but they had no idea they were developing this brand new version of music. And for all intents and purposes, which is one of the reasons why Charlie Parker is so essential to the history, not only of jazz, but music, is the fact that he did so much that transcended every genre of music. And it was modern. It was totally mind-blowing. As Terry Gibbs said, Charlie Parker was probably departed onto this planet from a spaceship because he just wasn't real. We haven't heard anything like it. We may never, ever in our lifetimes.
Now, when you talk about the old guard, I recall a story you told me about Cab Calloway.
Yeah.
It might have been, is one of our bebop artists. I want to say one of the angry guys.
Charlie Mingus.
Charlie Mingus. And it was Calloway that finally turned back to him and said, "Quit playing the Chinese music."
Yes, that's right. That's right. And Mingus probably picked up that bass and swung at him.
Yeah, would be my guess.
Guy. Before we depart here real quick of talking about the Neon Beat, I want to make sure that you all know you can go to Radio George.
It'll be backwards. But
yeah, but you get the idea.
Watch this thing when it replays in a mirror.
Yes.
And then you'll be able to read it.
Well, and then you could also play us backwards, and we'll be like a Beatles album, and then you can see this frontwards, and everybody will be happy.
You can play it backwards. Unfortunately, we'll be saying things like, and we'll call that jazz vocalese.
That's right. We're going to do avant-garde jazz. We're musicians. We're not just talking here. Come on.
Come on, get in the spirit of things.
That's right.
All right.
All right, well, you know what? I think we've done enough talking. I think we need to have a little of the George Shearing effect.
Let's let George kind of take it on out here with this cut on the Capitol label. Ladies and gentlemen, the piano of George Shearing.
Have a nice life.
Neon Jazz.